Just kind of hear a few points. Richland County has recently held a total of 10 community meetings for residents, where we were able to learn more about the $23.5 million grant, where they were able to learn, and we were able to learn from you some additional information. We have been awarded the funds. We are not in receipt. We are working on a live, breathing document called our action plan that is due in September. But today's meeting, we're going to focus on the local community, business community, which is, again, is a vital part of this action plan. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce our two council members who are here with us today. We have County Councilman Jim Manning, who is with District 8, and Vice Chair Greg Pearce with District 6, who helped coordinate today's meeting, along with Richland County Community Development and others. So without further ado, I'll turn over the mic to the two of these fine gentlemen.
Thank you, Valeria. I'm Greg Pearce. I'm the Vice Chairman of Richland County Council. I also represent District 6. The English language is a very interesting thing. She mentioned both of our names, and then she mentioned coordinate, and it sounded like I was the one that coordinated. Both of us actually coordinated the meeting today. I want to make sure that was clear. Jim and I, together, probably represent one of the hardest hit areas of Richland County as far as businesses go. We represent most of the Gills Creek corridor, where as many of you, if any of you own businesses in that area, it was rather devastating. In my council district is the infamous Title Max on Divine Street, which constantly reminds us all every day of how difficult things were 9 months ago. But we've been out having these stakeholders meetings. We've been listening to the public. But we wanted to particularly focus on the business community and find out what the business community's needs are, what your thoughts are, how you feel like we can best spend this money. So we wanted to particularly focus that meeting today. We thank you all for physically being here, the ones that are physically present. I hope there are plenty of people out there in webinar land. This is my first webinar, so I hope there are many of you out there watching. I imagine that we would record this, so it would be available for further showing. So without further ado, let me introduce my colleague, Mr. Manning, and let him have a few words, and then we'll get started.
Thank you very much, Vice Chairman Pearce. I, too, want to thank everybody that's here and everybody that's watching. I especially want to say appreciation to the county staff. There's several folks that had to work together to see that we could do this. One of the concerns that we had was we wanted to be sensitive, particularly to small businesses, because depending on what your business is, there are times a day that you just don't have time to drive somewhere to get to a meeting and drive back plus be at the meeting. And so we looked at this as a way that you could either be watching it now live streaming, or that you could watch the archive version and be able to know what's going on. Particularly the email address will be active, so at any point you're watching this and you want to email questions or ask some questions about a question that you heard today, you'll have the opportunity to do that over the next week or so. So this isn't static. This is a process that even still has a few days ahead of it for people to interact that may be watching the archive. So I do want to thank everybody from the county staff that worked to make this possible, to do it in a unique way, to try to do the very best, as Richland County always does, to have input, transparency, accountability, and input from the great citizens of our county so that we can best serve you. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Valeria, who's going to introduce who will be doing the presentation and facilitating the questions and answers this afternoon. Again, thank you very much.
I can't remember because we've been running around all day, so I want to make sure that I would be remiss if I didn't introduce myself as I'm speaking here. Valeria Jackson, Richland County Community Development, and we also have with us today Tiffany Crane, who is the Assistant Program Manager for the Disaster Recovery Funds. We have our PIO staff. Thank you, PIO. Thank you, Justin. I'm sure he's out there in as they say, radio, TV land. And also we have Dolores Moselle, who is here with us as well. So thank you, staff, for being here. And I just wanted to give you a brief overview of the whole state, actually. For those of you who have not heard, the entire state is going to be a recipient of $157 million for disaster recovery. We have on our screens where you can see a breakdown of those funding amounts, but we're looking at Richland being at $23.5 million, the city being at 19.8 or 9, and Lexington at 16.3. And bringing up the rear is the state of South Carolina for the other counties that have been impacted to the tune of $96 million, giving us $157 million to address the need. What we all know, and we've all spoken with all of our, we're coordinating with each other, is unfortunately is still not enough to benefit everything that we need to do that has been a devastation from or a direct result or aftermath of the floods. But we're fortunate and we're happy and blessed with the amount of monies that we do have to hopefully address some of the needs. And with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Tiffany Crane.
Hi everyone, my name's Tiffany Crane and it's a great Friday. So I'm hoping that I can share my enthusiasm with you guys about this money and about this process. It is a long process. There are a lot of steps that are going to need to be taken in order to deliver this money, but I do think we have a real opportunity here to make a real impact. As Valeria said, the money that we do have isn't going to be enough to cover all of our needs, but it is going to be enough for us to start making an impact for long-term recovery. So I actually report to Valeria for this project. I'm the Assistant Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Program Manager. And so it's going to be my responsibility to help advise on the programs and implementation as we go forward. So if through this process we're going to be together, for quite a while, just remember that if I do something, go tell on me to Valeria. So, but this money that we are going to be working to deliver is funded by HUD. And it's important to note that this money is different than the money that has previously come in. After a disaster, and you can see on the slide here, disaster day 0, lots of resources start flooding in. So it's a lot of your emergency response, a lot of volunteer organizations, trying to get resources to people as quickly as possible because everybody's in crisis mode. Typically in disasters, and other grantees have seen this in the past, where you have FEMA and emergency management, and then everybody uproots and leaves. And then there's a really long time where nothing really happens. And I think what Richland County has really done well is your emergency and management department has really done an excellent job in connecting people and resources. And they're going to continue to do that. They're not going to just stop because there's this next phase starting. And so we'll still be working hand in hand with emergency management, but we are entering a new phase with this long-term recovery, which is HUD funded. So, next slide. So I showed that previous slide to put things into context, who, what, when, and where. We had a disaster, there was a response, and now we are looking forward. We are going to try to do long-term recovery activities. And so we'll talk more about the HUD-funded opportunity, the CDBGDR money that will be coming down. And as Valeria said, we don't have this money yet. It has been set aside for us, but there are certain benchmarks that we have to meet to prove to HUD that we can handle this money, that we can operate efficiently, that we can do the best we can to serve our citizens with this money. And so, this includes programs, the opportunities are in housing, infrastructure, economic development, and principally that's what we'll focus on here today is that economic development piece. Of note, particularly on this slide, is that this is a gap funding source. So CDBG-DR money, it's this new $23.5 million everybody's excited about. It is new money, and it cannot serve the same purpose as any of the money that has been received yet, or to date. So with that being said, if you are a business and your structure got flooded and you lost inventory, and your insurance paid you for your inventory and to rebuild your building or to rehabilitate the building itself, if you still have a need after all of that is paid out and you use that money for the purpose that it was intended, insurance money to pay for the building and your inventory, we may be able to help you with CDBG-DR money. But if you had another need, like you needed to replace your car, and that was very important for you and you had no other way to replace your car, and you took that insurance money and that was meant for your business and you used it for a car, we're not going to be able to then take CDBG-DR money and help you rebuild your building, because you basically got two sources of funding for the same purpose, and one source of those funds was used inappropriately, even though it may have been a real need for you. And so that's called a duplication of benefit, and we'll get into that in much more detail further on. But the point is just to say that this money is meant to be a stopgap for those funds that that you still may have to recover. Let me flip. So when we are looking at which types of programs we can design to get money to the community, we have to answer 6 basic questions. And the first one is whether the project is eligible under CDBG. So CDBG is the core program that actually Richland County gets money for every year. And they do a lot of work in the community for that, and they to the tune of about $1 million a year. Well, this DR money still is CDBG related. There's just some extra requirements that go along with it. And this money is 23 times what Richland County gets in any given year. And so we just have to make sure that the projects that we choose, whether that is a loan program for businesses or a housing rehabilitation program, that it is eligible under CDBG. We also have to look at that duplication of benefit that I was talking about a minute ago. We have to analyze all of the sources of funds that have already come in and make sure that there is still an unmet need so that we can use this money to fill that need. There has to be a direct link to the storm. So if your building was impacted or damaged, that's a direct link. But sometimes when we're talking about business and economic development, that link will still be considered direct by HUD, but in our minds, it might not be so direct. So if it's not physical damage to the building and you lost electricity for 3 weeks and you couldn't open your store or your business for that time, and you lost that operational time, that's also a business loss. Typically, people have business loss insurance for that, but not everyone does. But again, that's a link back to the storm. We also have to make sure that the project timeline is consistent with the program requirements. And HUD has put out a requirement that we spend this money within 6 years. And that sounds like a really long time. This allocation of money, this time period is different than what they've done previously, what HUD has done previously. In previous allocations, that timeline has been 2 years. And if you look at other grantees who have had that 2-year timeline, for instance, the most recent one is with Hurricane Sandy. New Jersey and New York have had to go back to HUD every 2 years since then and ask for an extension. So what HUD has done in this allocation for us in giving us 6 years to spend the money has they've really streamlined the process for us so that we don't have to, for lack of a better term, thinking on my feet, waste time going to HUD and going through that process to ask for an extension should we need an extension. But we do anticipate that we will have a timeline that is not extending 6 years to 6 years. The fifth criteria that we have to meet when we are designing projects is whether it will meet a national objective. And so there's 3 national objectives that HUD has, and when they are spending money. And I'll talk more about them on the next slide, but we do have to meet one of them. And will this project help to meet low to moderate income targets that are actually required in the Federal Register where this money, the rules for this money is published? Next slide. So this slide actually, kind of shows the national objectives. There are 3. There's a low to moderate income national objective, a slum and blight national objective, and an urgent need national objective. Slum and blight and urgent need are pretty much what they sound like. You have a derelict building or property that's in disarray. We're allowed to design programs to go ahead and clear those properties and make them safe. Urgent need is exactly that, urgent need. Somebody's roof is caved in. It doesn't matter whether they are low to moderate income. We've got to take care of that need. But the big one for us is low to moderate income properties or areas. HUD generally, most of their programs all have this low to moderate income requirement. And so there's a 70% set aside with this money. So 70% of the money, or $16.4 million of the 23.5 that we will be receiving, will have to go to serve low to moderate income citizens. And that can be direct assistance if you are a low to moderate income individual and your home has been destroyed or damaged. We can give you a direct benefit if you otherwise qualify for the programs. But also there's an area benefit. And so when you're looking at an area, and this is more common with an economic development project or an infrastructure project, where the area that is served by that infrastructure. So for a road that was washed out, if we were going to rebuild that road, we would look at the census tracts, and if 51% of the individuals within that census tract are considered low to moderate income, we would be meeting our national objective for low to moderate income citizens. So the next slide. All right, so that's kind of down in the details that I'm sure most people probably don't enjoy or share my enthusiasm for those details. But it is really important to understand that these are requirements. And these are things that as we design these programs, we really have to keep in mind, and we have to monitor, and we have to make sure that every dollar that we spend is either meeting meeting the low to moderate income national objective so that we can get to that 70% threshold, or that it is going to one other eligible activity that meets another national objective. So the types of programs that are generally funded with this money are housing, infrastructure, economic development, and planning. And there is another small bucket in there that you can use a little bit of money for public service work, like housing counseling or other counseling services. But these are the 4 big buckets. Planning in this context is very specific. It's not a bunch of people just getting into a room and discussing what is the plan and making an action item list or a task list and saying, let's go forth. It's an actual document. So we can't spend any money on planning unless the end result is going to be a physical document, such as a long-term recovery plan or an update to the building codes or zoning laws. So with all of that, there's a lot of new opportunity. So I probably made it sound really cumbersome in everything that I've said before, and this process definitely isn't easy, but there actually is a lot of new opportunity with this. Previously, before the CDBG-DR program, you had to go to each individual federal agency and seek money, and you had to figure out which programs each agency provided, then figure out, do you qualify, do you not qualify, and apply for that money. CDBGDR brings all of that, not all of it, but brings many of those programs together and streamlines those requirements, even though there still are hurdles that we will have to leap over to get this money. So, next one. So just to describe a couple of the key actions that have been taken to date, our Federal Register notice, which was basically the shot in the air that sent us all off to the races, that became effective on June 22nd. So within 30 days of June 22nd, the county and all of the other grantees had to turn in a plan to HUD called a risk analysis, where we had to describe our capacity to deliver this money and our financial controls to make sure that we could responsibly take care and deliver the money. So that risk analysis and implementation plan was due today, and I am happy to report that Richland County has turned theirs in, and we have now crossed the finish line for hurdle 1. So now the next big hurdle for us is the action plan, which will be due September 30th. And we are currently working on that. A big part of that is identifying the unmet needs of the community, whether that's housing, infrastructure, or economic development, and then really digging into those buckets and seeing, within housing, is it rental housing or is it single family housing? For businesses, is it loans? Is it startup capital? What types of programs are going to have the most impact? And then we'll have to make a recommendation, and that action plan is actually the roadmap by which this money will be divided up and spent. I'm trying to think. Let's see if there's anything else on that slide as far as critical dates. Yeah, we've done 10 outreach meetings to date that were just general public outreach meetings. Today is the 4th of 4 stakeholder meetings. This one focusing on business. We had 3 others that were focused on volunteer organizations and community relations as well. We, yeah, I think that's good for that one. So getting specifically into this action plan, because that is our next big deadline with HUD, we can go through that one too. We have to analyze, and HUD mandates that we analyze housing, infrastructure, and economic development needs. And you're going to hear me repeat those over and over and over again. You're probably going to go to sleep thinking about me saying these 3 things over again. But housing, infrastructure, and economic development are the 3 big tenets of HUD. And so we have to actually look and see all of the money that has been received. We have to see that the damage that was done. We have to look and find out how much of that money actually repaired or met a need, and then how much need still remains. And when we calculate the need that remains, that will inform the projects that we recommend to through the Blue Ribbon Committee, our working group and Blue Ribbon Committee, to the council. As of today, we have identified that there is north of $220 million in housing need. That's an astounding amount of money. We have also identified that there's more than $10 million in infrastructure, and we've identified at least $1 million in economic development need. And this is why this meeting today is so important, and why we need feedback from our local business community, because our data for economic development isn't as solid as it is for infrastructure and housing. And so we do anticipate that $1 million that we have already identified will grow, but we need more information. But as you can see, so far, $231 million is what we've identified, and we have the potential to get $23.5 million. It's a big gap. It's 10% of what we really need. So we've got to make some hard decisions about how we spend this limited resource and make sure that we make the most impact that we can to have, the best long-term recovery that we can. And we will also keep monitoring that need as we go through this process and keep documenting it so that we can support a case for additional money in the future if we need to. And so this just graphically shows how we are currently planning to recommend the allocation of money of the $23.5 million. So basically 55% of that we are recommending will go into housing, another 17% into infrastructure. We have about 8% going into economic development, and another 15% in planning, and I can't read the slide, I think it's, yeah, 5% for administration costs. Because it also takes a lot of money to make sure that we are complying with everything that HUD needs us to comply with. And with it being $23.5 million, we have to supplement staff in order to make sure that we can handle the number of projects that we're going to have to undertake in a timely manner. And the next one. So this is actually the same information as the pie chart. It's just if you're more of a words person instead of a visual person, it breaks the numbers down in the same way, just showing how we're recommending that we get to $23.5 million. And this is just preliminary. This is not set in stone. As we get more information, you know, the pieces of that pie are going to shift, and recommendations on the ultimate recommendation may change as well. Also, it's important to note that on September 30th, this action plan is due, but we also have to have a public comment period before that. And so that's another opportunity for the public to engage and say, well, hey, you know, we see that you're using this money in this way. Have you considered this other option? Or, you know, to make whatever comment that you feel is valid and supports us making the most informed decision for how we use this money. And the very last thing to note about the action plan is that as we go through this, it will be amended. HUD knows it will be amended. HUD expects us to amend it because, as I said before, you start getting into these programs, you've designed them, you start working the programs, and then you get new or better or different information, and it causes you to have to reassess. And by reassessing and refining, we and HUD hopes that we can, you know, deliver these projects in the most efficient way and the most beneficial way. So our next steps are, you know, after we submit the action plan, is that we have to wait on HUD to approve it. HUD has 60 days to approve our action plan. So that would take us out to November 19th, which is a Saturday. HUD's not going to approve anything on a Saturday. So we'll probably find out no later than November 21st. HUD has indicated that they are instituting some streamlined processes, so we are hoping that they don't take the full 60 days, but they have every right to take the full 60 days to approve it. Once they approve the action plan, they will actually send the county a grant agreement, and the county has to enter into that agreement and establish a line of credit in order to start accessing that money. And then the full programs, you know, will begin. There are some activities. I know the slide says that we're anticipating programs to begin in December and January. There are some activities that we will be starting or planned to start prior to that to identify individuals who may wish to apply for the programs once we design the programs and roll those out so that people know what is available. All right. And so the last thing, and I think probably one of the more important things for the business community is what can you do with this money if you're a business? And so past grantees have designed programs for, like I said, business grants and loans. Some grantees have used it for tourism, which that one's a little tricky with HUD. But if that's a big part of your community's vitality, that is an opportunity as tourism marketing. Also, technical assistance programs for small businesses. So that would be setting up resources, a resource center, for example, for small businesses to come in and talk about business resiliency planning. How do you plan for that future future disaster, what steps can you take, what resources are out there, and just really connecting businesses to make sure that in the future, if there is a foreseeable disaster or a foreseeable, I guess disasters really aren't foreseeable, are they? But if there's a foreseeable issue in the future, then you could actually plan for that. I'm sorry, I just stumbled over my words and was having a hard time recover there.
Bless you.
The other thing that can be done with CDBGDR money for economic development purposes is workforce and job creation and training. That one's a really big one. But again, at the end of the day, the beneficiary at the end, you know, when the money is delivered, that target, we still have that 70% LMI target. So we have to be benefiting an area that has a 51% LMI population, or we have to be benefiting 70, you know, up to 70% of individuals who have an LMI, are in an LMI bracket. So with that,
Okay.
I think we are going to take questions.
We are. Just want to, thank you. Right. Don't go too far. Yes, just want to reiterate to those of you who are joining us via broadcast, it is being broadcast live on our website, www.rcgov.us. Those not in attendance can watch online, and as Mr. Manning has said, it will be archived as well. You have the opportunity to do that, or you can text. The text questions or comments, the number is 803-240-4699. And also, please feel free to visit Richland County's Facebook page at Richland SC, Facebook page at Richland SC, or Twitter account at Richland SC, and use the hashtag RC Recovery. That's RC Recovery to submit a question or comment on social media. And for those who want to have additional information on our latest flood recovery, we have a website that's been developed. And again, it is rcgov.us/flood recovery for the latest flood recovery information, or you can email us at recovery@rcgov.us. So with that, I think we have a few questions. I'm going to let Tiffany come back and read some of the questions that we have already received, unless there are any questions that are polled from the audience. We want to start there first because you're here with us. Yes, ma'am.
I do have one question. Are these funds limited to the incorporated area or unincorporated?
Okay, so the question, just to repeat it, is are the funds limited to the incorporated or unincorporated areas of the county? So on one of the very first slides Ms. Jackson showed was the breakout between Richland County, Lexington County, Columbia, and the state. So each of those government bodies has to spend their money within their borders. So for the county, our money actually excludes the city of Columbia. The city of Columbia can only spend their money within city limits, and then Lexington County spends their money within their limits. Does that answer your question?
Same thing would apply from the town of Eastover to incorporated township.
Is correct, because there are other areas such as Eastover, Irmo, Forest Acres, Arcadia Lakes, Blythewood, and I feel like I'm leaving someone out. But the incorporated areas are the town propers of. Those should be inclusive of our Richland County.
Yes. So any incorporated or unincorporated area within the county, excluding City of Columbia, would be potentially eligible for this money. Better? Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the audience?
Yes, sir.
But is it not correct that the city must follow the same guidelines?
Absolutely.
So if people are watching that are from the city,
Mm-hmm.
the city will be needing to follow these guidelines. So
Absolutely. We all have to follow the same rules, so it's just where we can spend our money is the big difference. And then we also have some degree of flexibility in the programs that we choose to design or deliver for this money as well. Anyone else? Okay.
Okay. Well, we can go to text message. Our first text message question, and thank you so much for that, is, will the county be doing business property buyouts?
Okay, so we do have a few non-residential buyouts that we have already applied for through HMGP. And the work group in, for the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program. And so that's all on the FEMA side of money. And the work group in BRC have indicated wanting to allocate some CDBGDR funding to match those FEMA funds, because that is actually one really cool thing that you can do with this source of federal money, is you can actually use it as a match. Most federal funds you can't use to match other federal funds, but the CDBGDR money does allow that. So work group and the Blue Ribbon Committee have indicated that they want to look at the possibility of using those match funds to support the buyout of those those businesses. So yes, buyouts, even business buyouts, are eligible activities under CDBGDR.
Great. We have a Facebook question. Is there lost revenue available for businesses impacted by the flood?
So you're not going to like my answer to that question because it's no. But I don't think that the county will use the CDBGDR money to make payments to business owners to replace lost revenue. But there are other programs and other ways that this money can be used to support businesses. And so through providing working capital, facility repairs, training, that type of thing, we're able to help businesses get back on their feet.
All right, and we actually have someone registering on Twitter. I've already repaired my business that happened as a result of the flood damage. Can I be reimbursed?
So that's another good question. Under CDBGDR, reimbursement is allowed. It's an allowable activity. In a very narrow set of circumstances. So there are some pretty strict rules on reimbursement. Typically, jurisdictions choose not to do reimbursement, and actually it was just really first allowed or broadly allowed with Sandy. So it's a newer component to this. But typically jurisdictions, particularly when they have such a limited set of resources and they have so many people with still unmet needs, and the easiest example really is in housing. And similar to a business, you know, if you have someone who has run through their own personal savings to repair their house, but they are now living in good conditions, and you have someone who didn't have any resources and couldn't repair their home and still has an unmet need, the grantees typically will use money to help those people who are still in need before they do a reimbursement program. And so that's not to say that there won't be a reimbursement program. It's still a conversation that I think the county needs to have and make a decision on. But typically, if there's another allocation or if there's money left over at the end, that's usually when a reimbursement program is instituted.
Okay, I would like to ask and answer a question that we received at our 10 o'clock meeting earlier today. The question was, I am a nonprofit healthcare collaborative, and I've sustained major damage to our medical facility. Would this fall under the economic area for assistance? And the answer is yes, that would be likely to fall under economic development, but it may also be considered as a public or social services, depending on the qualifications and the criteria. Assistance to nonprofits, especially those damaged by the storm, is definitely eligible. So we have to make sure as we're going through this process that we are developing different programs, and that might be one. So we haven't drilled down just yet, but that is a possibility as we're moving forward. And it can be considered an economic development or a separate social service program because it is a nonprofit.
All right. Were there any other questions that came in?
And we have one more from Facebook, which is, how can I, as a business owner, be better prepared for a future natural disaster?
All right. Well, that's a really great question. And I'm not just saying that to buy time. It's a really great question. There are lots of ways. I mean, the first thing is really to look at your situation and figure out why it is that you flooded in the first place. It may be there's development, uphill from you that caused extra problems for you when the flooding happened. And to see if there's anything that you can do to mitigate that, that very well may be looking to relocate your business. Sometimes those are very hard decisions, but in reality, you need to look at that. But there are some really great resources online, actually, and if you type in, you go to a Google search and type in disaster recovery toolkit for businesses or something like that. Some things will come up that are paid. I wouldn't recommend paying for any of those because there's plenty of free resources on the internet that will give you checklists that you can use as a business to make sure that you have redundancies in your data. Your business receipts and your taxes and all of that stuff, making sure that you have an extra storage place for that off-site, and very well may be in the cloud, and making sure that you have a plan for something that happens going forward, making sure that you have your insurance in place, making sure that you know ahead of time what resources will be available, and making sure that you make those connections before a disaster happens. So.
All right, an additional one from Twitter. How will I know how the county ends up spending this money?
Okay, so that's going to be actually in the action plan, which again will be published on September 20th. Well, will be submitted to HUD on September 20th, but we will be publishing to the website and making available for viewing by the public prior to that. So it was August 16th, I think, or 26th, that we're planning to publish the action plan, August 26th. And we are discussing having the potential of having another public meeting once that action plan is published, so we can publish it to the website, maybe allow people to look at it, and then have another meeting so that people can come and comment. But you don't just have to be in person to comment. You can online. There will be a link to submit a comment. There will also be information if you don't want to submit it online. You can drop comments off in person as well. And there's always comment forms that you could fill out and return. Either hand deliver them to the Office of Community or the Department of Community Development. So the comment, we were in a meeting earlier today, and the comment question, someone had a real problem with it. What's the purpose of us, submitting all these comments? What are you going to do with these comments? Is it just to make us feel better, basically, and you write it down and then it goes into a black hole? And that's really not it at all. We actually do use the feedback, and HUD requires us to not only collect it, but log it, classify it, and respond to every single comment that we get. So, the comments are very helpful. They are very useful. We do need them, and we do want them. So please give us your feedback. So the question is for business resiliency, what portion of the money, if we designed a program for business resiliency, what portion of that would go towards administration of the program?
My question was, if a business owner applied for a grant to provide that service, what percentage would go for administrative services?
Okay, so if a business owner applied for a grant to provide business resiliency services?
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks. I'm asking just in general, when you say administrative costs, what are you thinking in that area? What type of, how would you define administrative cost?
Personnel associated with carrying out those functions.
I think where we're still at is I hear you. Yes, ma'am. I know we have, at this point in juncture, we're looking at $1 million going towards economic needs of this funding. So I think once we start to drill down, as we're getting information throughout this meeting, throughout other businesses, we'll kind of make that determination. But I think we can take that on an advisement as far as the administrative cost that it would take from the personnel perspective if there's a grant designed that way.
And so one other question that I have for you is that a service that you or someone you know can or would provide?
Yes. Facility available.
Okay. If you wouldn't mind,
A comment form?
do we have the comment forms here?
If you would.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I'm going to give you I don't know if you have something to write with too. My email address is Crane, CRANE, T, at rcgov.us. And so if you could provide any sort of information on the types of ideas that you might have for that, that's definitely something that we need to take into consideration, because we haven't decided yet, and the county council hasn't made a determination of exactly which services are going to be provided. That's part of what we're working on with this action plan submission. But we need to know from our business community who does offer what services. And so if you could provide that information, that would be great. Yes, ma'am.
Going back to where if you lost your business in the flood, I lost my entire business in the flood, and I've relocated on my money, and now I'm broke. And it sounds like there's no help for us if we've already moved on, and I've got no money from anybody else. Is there anything in this program to give me funding?
Okay, so that question needs to be dissected a little bit. So from a business standpoint, if you still have a need with regard to your business, if you've relocated and you've essentially recovered, but for the fact you now have no savings, there's not an unmet need there according to HUD standards.
But when you've been
But
alone, you lose a lot of your business trying to get people to find you, so you don't make any money. So
exactly.
you're still hurting from something that you didn't have any control over.
So that's where a microloan program or working capital loan program might be an option. You have to go through an application process. We would have to determine whether all of the eligibility criteria are met, and that stuff still hasn't been designed. But there should, if there is a loan program, that's the type of program that would probably be the fit for that need. But when I was saying you dissect that question, so if you've gone through savings, you're a small business owner, you've gone through savings, is that also affecting your housing needs and your ability to live, in housing? So yeah. So once we get into the actual programs that are designed, I can't answer your question definitively, yes or no, there is or isn't going to be help for your particular situation. But there are programs, and we intend to design programs, to help people as best we can. And your situation does fit within some of those types of programs that can be offered. I know that's not a great answer.
But
Yes, ma'am.
moved and started to move forward, but the economy crashed at the same time. And so, you're still in the same place. Well, you're not where you were, and now you're in just worse shape than you were before the flood.
Yes, ma'am. And this is the type of information we need to hear about. I know Valeria, and you may be able to talk about this more, working with the chamber and other business organizations to gather information on impacted business owners. So again, it's probably little consolation at this point, but making sure that you get that information to us and letting us know what your situation is will help us inform what types of programs we need to design. So.
Ma'am, can I ask, what area are you located, or you were located in, your business?
I was behind Copeland's on Forest Drive, right at Gill Creek. We were totally impacted, 8 feet of water, lost everything. I'd been there for 22 years. And moved up the street, but just moving a block away, you lose a lot of your business because they don't know you moved. Did you come back from the flood? What's going on? Because you don't have money to advertise because you've used it all to get started back up again. So you're kind of in a hole, and you don't quite know how to dig out of it. No matter how hard you work, you just kind of keep going backwards. So I was just wondering if any of this money was going to go to help, even a little bit offset to help so you get yourselves back up to where you were before, to move forward.
And it's a definite possibility with the program design. As we said, right now we've identified $1 million in need with economic development, which includes all your businesses. We are pretty sure that that's low, and that we do expect that number to grow as we get better data. And so we, on the conservative side, are recommending at least $2 million in that business bucket of money right now. Now, that hasn't been approved. It's still a moving target, but we definitely intend, I think the county definitely intends to put money in that business bucket. So.
I do want to just kind of touch a little base on that of, there's a piece, and Tiff, you may have already said this, but the duplication of benefit. So, like, for instance, if you were in receipt of an SBA loan or FEMA, or you had business insurance, and if we design a program that fits into that qualifier, we'd have to back out any additional funding you've received from the need.
No funding from anybody.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm totally self-funding at the moment, and I got no funding from anybody. And if you're talking about loans, and typically loans don't get given to people who need money. I mean, it's just the truth. If you need, because SBA, the first thing they said to me was, you don't have an income. And I had just lost my business, and that's the first thing they said was, you don't have an income. And so there again, if you do loans and we have to apply, we're currently still not having technically an income.
So the loan standards for these programs are different. They're not as stringent as going to a bank. They're not even. They're probably similar to SBA, but there's some real customization that you can do in the program design to make sure that you're able to deliver benefits to businesses who need them. Again, I'm not giving you a solid answer because we just don't have the answers right now. But please stay in contact. Please keep checking the website for more information. We intend to have more meetings. We intend, to respond to comments too. Email us, come by and see us, so that we can, keep you informed of what's going on and keep the information flowing to you as we get more answers and design this to roll it out. Let me go to him real quick, and then I'll come right back to you.
What about the claims against your structure that you have problem with your insurance carrier? Will you have to take care of everything from attorney's fees from the lawsuit?
We do not pay for legal fees with this money, no. Yes, ma'am. You had another question?
Badly, you mentioned the 5 feet we had, but on a personal perspective, small farmers that do produce, South Carolina certified grown, there appears to be no funding available. And on a personal note, small farmers that inundated about 5 feet, all of that was gone. And So have you established any sort of an impact form that businesses could potentially fill out that would indicate to you the level of impact? But I don't think people truly understand the devastation. I mean, you see it and then it goes away, but for those of us who are having to live through it, you're faced with 24/7 the same stuff over and over again. FEMA came in, but there were no funds available if you owned anything. And if you didn't own, then you were helped. And so there are no funds that were initially provided, and there appears to be no funds that are going to be available in the future. So my question is going to be how, what exactly are the folk to do? And loans are really kind of out of the question, because most of the folk that I know are at that age where you just don't do a 30-year loan for anything, because you were at that point where everything was already paid for, and now it's gone. It exists in a form, but not in the form where you can reap any benefit. You have an asset that has become a liability. So I really think that it's something that I would request that you look into, and that you consider devising some sort of a form that would make it simple for you to look at, and that way you could see the actual numbers to correlate with the level of devastation that actually took place.
And so, to your point, we are collecting a lot of data to analyze this stuff. And like you said, some of that is FEMA data, SBA data, which we do know is low. Similar to what has happened in Richland County with FEMA, my understanding of what happened with FEMA is a lot of people applied and a lot of people were denied, or their claims that were approved were very small compared to what the real damage was. And that has happened to other grantees as well. In the past, some programs have required that you qualified for some sort of FEMA assistance in order to get this other assistance through HUD. And that was a local requirement at the grantee level. That is something that we are recommending not happen in Richland County, that you don't make this money contingent on what FEMA did or didn't do for you. The other thing that, and I don't have access to the data sources right now, but did you have any information from Mason on the data that they were gathering for the businesses?
I don't. I think that's extremely preliminary. That information has been provided, I believe, to our assistant administrators, but it hasn't been shared with me yet.
Okay.
I think it just literally came in today.
Okay. So yeah, we are collecting, additional data as well. So, to your point about agriculture, agriculture is a business, and it is eligible for assistance under the CDBGDR money. So just depending on what types of programs we do. And I know I keep mentioning loans just because that's a really common form of assistance that's designed under these programs, but there's a lot of other options as well. So I'm not saying that there is going to be a loan program or not. There's also grant options that you can design as well. So, Mr. Manning, did you have anything?
The email address that's been presented today, the recovery@rcgov.us, that's going to be up and running for some time.
Yes, sir.
All right, so that's recovery, RECOVERY, at R, like Richland, C as in county, GOV, government.us. And also just want to say, for anybody that might be watching this, even though today's focus was on businesses impacted, anybody that sees this that lives in Richland County that has a question can write to that email address, and their input will get included, or if it needs referred to somewhere else, they will be referred.
Yes, sir.
So that's a good email address for anybody watching this. Anything really related to flood recovery that's sort of a one-stop, get your information in and get referred to where you need to be referred. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Did anybody else have any closing remarks or anything else to say?
Just on behalf of the county, we thank you all for coming out today. For all you folks watching, let me assure you that although this is as you've learned in this last hour, it's a highly technical, highly specific, highly bureaucratic, very difficult process for us to work through. But the county and the staff is here to work with you. If you will contact them, avail yourself of the people that we have. We have a cadre of people on board that are working on the flood. We will continue to do that until every dollar is collected. And let me just say one last thing about money. What we were talking about today is $23.5 million of community development block grant disaster assistance money. We also will be getting FEMA hazardous grant money, and we're attempting to go after every other dollar we can find. So 23 million, yes, that's what we're talking about today, but we'll continue until the last breath to continue to try to get every dollar that we can come up with to continue to support the people. As you saw, the need is $231 million. So we will continue to work very diligently, and we will continue to include the public on every step of the way on that process. Thank you so much for coming. Jim?
Thank you, Councilman Pearce. Let me also say that with that same email address, if you think there's some money that we may not know about, please let us know, because as Councilman Pearce said, we do have a whole lot of great people working on this, but it doesn't mean we know everything. So, you know, if your aunt, somebody in another state that experienced a flood, knows something about some money, please send it to us so that we can, if we're not already aware of it, that we can check it out, because we are committed to do every single thing that we can for every single citizen of Richland County. Thank you.